When was the moment you realized you were being used? I had known Michelle since childhood. She was always a bit snobbish and was desperate to be part of the in crowd in high school, but they wanted little to do with her, put off by her superior attitude. I never realized that she only hung out with me because she didn't have anything else to do until after high school. We would make plans to hang out together, but if something better came along, she would ditch me. It was like everyone could see that she was a bad friend except for me. She changed even further when she met a nice guy and decided to settle down with him. Everything revolved around her fiancé. Maybe because she had never had a real boyfriend before. I don't know. All I knew was that she stopped texting me to hang out, and when I texted her, she was always busy. I was invited to the wedding and I went solo as I did not have a date at the time. The bridal side of the wedding party consisted of her sister and her two gay guy friends. One of those friends later told me that they were only in the wedding party because she wanted to make a statement. I had a good time chatting with her family and intended to leave the wedding at about 11 p.m. to go back to my hotel room. Michelle came up to me at 10:30 and asked if I would drive her and her new husband to their lodging for the night. I'm the kind of person who would never leave a friend high and dry, so I agreed to drive her and her husband to wherever they needed to go. I went out to my car and made sure there was room for extra passengers. Then I went back inside to wait for them. 12:30 a.m. passed. Then 1 a.m. The two gay guys drove back to the hotel and texted me to tell me to drive safe as it had gotten foggy. 2 a.m. came and at this time, most of the guests had left. 3 a.m. I'm assisting in the cleanup. Meanwhile, Michelle and her siblings are drunkenly singing along to Michelle's iPod. She had been too cheap to get a DJ. As I helped her dad take out the garbage, he looks at me with pity in his eyes and he tells me, "You're a good friend, Ashley." At 4 a.m., the bride and groom are finally ready to call it a night. I drove them to their lodging, about a half hour out of my way, and then went back to my hotel. Michelle didn't contact me again for months and any texts I sent her were either ignored or rejected. A few months after I started dating my now husband, we went to visit a different friend and she was there too. She was very rude to my boyfriend. We all knew each other in high school and she scorned him because he was a geek back then. He wasn't popular. After that, we had little contact and she never offered a congratulations when I got engaged. I would have thought that she would have liked the way he proposed as he used a Harry Potter wand and both Michelle and I had been huge fans of the series. But she said nothing. I saw her once in the springtime, before I sent out my invitations. She was helping her grandmother clean up her yard as I was driving by with my fiancé. I pulled over. I had a nice chat with her grandmother, but Michelle wouldn't look me in the eye and shut down any conversation I attempted to have with her. Finally, my fiancé urged me to go, so we continued driving to my parents' place. As we are there, my fiancé tells my mom about the exchange. She was trying her heart out to talk to Michelle and that bitch just ignored her. My mom agreed that she had always disliked Michelle for the way she always treated me. I was slowly opening my eyes to who Michelle really was. I debated even inviting her to my wedding. I decided to be the bigger person and put the invite in the mail. The next day, my maid of honor, who also knew Michelle since childhood, asked if I was inviting Michelle. Apparently Michelle told her that even if she wasn't invited, she would crash my wedding. I said that I sent her an invite, so that dashed her plans of making a scene. Michelle texted me and told me she would be coming to the wedding. I also invited Michelle's parents to my wedding, and about 2 months before my wedding, her mom said, "Thank you, but we are going to be away that weekend. We have to go clean up Michelle's grandpa's old cabin. It's been 11 years since he passed and my brother and I have finally made plans to do it now. I will send my card with Michelle. Have a great day and congratulations." 5 days before the wedding, we are getting the final numbers for the caterer. I texted Michelle to confirm that she and her husband were still intending on coming as I didn't have an official RSVP. She texted me back, "That was the plan. However, last-minute plans were made to go through some of my grandpa's things, which I should really be part of." I meant to text you earlier than today. Reading that text brought back every single excuse she had ever given me when she had something better come along whenever we had made plans to hang out or do something. I knew very well that the plans to go sort through her grandpa's things were not last minute. I knew very well that had I not texted her, she would not have texted me and would have just been a no-show and I would have had to pay for the uneaten food. I finally realized that she was not a friend to me. She would use me unless something better came along. Suddenly her father's pity for me after Michelle's wedding made sense. He knew that she was using me and I was too naive to see it. He knew that she regarded me as a last resort, someone who would always help her out unquestioningly, but was not worthy of her time. I texted back, "Do what you've got to do. I get it." And I finally did. I finally knew what kind of person she was. It was the last thing I ever texted or said to her. That was 3 years ago. In that time, I've gone on to have a sweet baby boy. She got divorced because she was cheating on her husband. I guess something better came along there too. What's a rule your employer implemented that backfired terribly? Many years ago, I worked at a factory that did plastic and wax injection molding. The guy running the place had worked there since he was in his early 20s, so you'd think he'd have a good handle on how things were done. The problem with his leadership was that he had come up through the ranks as a salesman. He spent little to no time actually doing engineering or production. He was a wonderful salesman and a couple times landed contracts that were a great boon to the company. The man had a gift. He could have sold manure to a cattle farmer. One of his biggest contracts was a government contract. We were going to be making parts for the US military. During wartime, these types of contracts are as good as they come. The type of high-demand production runs that fill bank accounts. Workers were asked to work a minimum of 60 hours a week, with unlimited overtime pre-approved. Some of us younger workers were working 80-plus hours a week, only going home during the work week to get some sleep, then coming right back at 5 a.m. Bank. I was running a machine that made a part. We'll call it Widget X. Well, Widget X was a fairly large part that required a lengthy cooldown phase. You can't just inject molten wax into a mold and expect it to hold shape until it is properly cooled. We only had one machine that was large enough to make Widget X, so it ran 24/7. A few months into the production run, management was in a bit of a panic. Widget X was one of the most important parts of the contract and we were falling behind on production schedule. Engineering and quality control were asked to find a way to speed up production, but they told management the biggest time sink was in the cooling phase. There just wasn't any way around that. If they lowered the temperature of the wax, it would be too thick upon injection and break the fragile ceramic cores in the mold. If they actively cooled the die, the wax would solidify unevenly and cause warping. Mr. Leader, despite the fact that he had oversold our production capabilities, insisted that there was a way to increase output to meet demand. So he began looking into each and every step of the process. Back to me running the machine. As I said, there was a very lengthy cooldown phase where the machine remained locked shut until the part was ready. During this phase, I took a little time to pick a new CD to listen to while working. I said this was many years ago. Seeing me clicking around with my Discman, Mr. Leader went into a fit of rage. No wonder we're so far behind schedule. That's it. No more listening to music while working. We need to get back on track and I don't want to see another set of headphones in this place until we do. If you've never done it before, injection molding has to be one of the most boring jobs on the planet. You press the two start buttons, wait for the machine to close, do its thing, then wait some more until the part is ready. You remove the part, push the buttons again, and wait. That's the whole job. Music was one of the few things that made the job bearable. We could disappear into our own heads and only surface every few minutes to restart the process. Now that we couldn't do that, the boredom was up in our face. Staring at a giant metal press for 5 to 15 minutes at a time was dull. Very dull. So, we had to find ways to amuse our minds for that time. Being the social creatures that we are, we turned to our neighbors and began talking to each other. The problem is that machine shops are really noisy. In order to have a conversation that is not at a scream, we'd often have to take a few steps toward our neighbor. This, as you could imagine, meant that the machine operator's attention was not focused on the machine they were running, but on their conversations. Then when the machine was done running, they'd take a few seconds to finish their sentence and walk back to their machines. Production slowed. In cases like the machine I was running, not by much. However, some of the smaller parts only had 30 to 60 seconds run times. An additional 10 seconds per part added up very quickly. Now parts that were running on time were running behind. 2 weeks into the new rule, the owner of the company paid our department a visit. This almost never happened. He was always in his office on the phone or out on business. He had found out that every single part we were working on had fallen behind and wanted to know why. Mr. Leader had fed him a line that he didn't buy for a second and was going to figure it out himself. Luckily, the owner of the company understood production because he had done it early in his career. He knew how boring the job was and that asking employees to sit and stare while doing nothing was cruel. He rescinded the no music policy immediately and production resumed at a normal pace. He also then called one of his friends in the business and subcontracted some of the production of Widget X to him. In the end, nothing changed about how fast we could produce Widget X, but at least the rest of the contracts were back on schedule and we could listen to music again. As a teacher, have you ever been pressured to fix grades? I'd say about every other year, I get some feedback from parents or students to change a grade. Last June took the cake. I had a student. He did okay. When he did the work about half the time. He was late every day. He had a bit of an attitude. He is required to pass the class to graduate. I called him up several times over the semester to discuss his grade and these discussions were generally ignored. I said, if you do your work from now until spring break, I'll let you make up the missing work so you can pass with a good grade. Nothing changed. No problems for me. When all was said and done, he had a solid 60.3% going into the final. I told him the final was pass/fail for him. Pretty much any fail would drop his grade, and he would not be allowed to graduate. He says, no big deal, I've got it. Well, he didn't quite have it. He scored 39% on the final. He failed. He comes in to see me the day after the final, the day before the grade is due. Can I make up some work? Can I do some extra credit? Is there anything I can do? I reply, no, I'm sorry. I gave you several chances to make up your missing work. You ignored them. I told you it was do or die on the final. You died. Now, your counselor will suggest summer school. You are smart enough to take this class at the community college and get both college and high school grades for this. I know you were planning on community college anyway. That would be the smart way to go. But I have family coming from out of town. Okay, I need to pass. I feel bad about that, because you are not passing. He leaves and about 30 minutes later, the head dean comes in and says, his father is a good friend of mine. Is there anything we can do? I say, sorry, I gave him a chance to make up the work. He refused to do that. For me, this is finished. We chat a bit more, and he takes off. About 15 minutes later, there is a commotion outside my room. The kid is there with his mother and a security guard. The guard says, they say you have a meeting scheduled with them now. I say, I don't have any meeting scheduled today. I don't need to talk to them. This discussion is over. I close the door and the guard escorts them from campus. About 30 minutes later, the AP in charge of my department is at my door, asking, what's going on with George? He failed. Is there anything he can do? No. And to be honest, I don't like being questioned about this. He failed. That's that. I am not questioning you. I just want to know what's going on. I then said, and that is a question. He failed. You can support me or not, but that isn't going to change. We are in California, only teachers are allowed to assign or change grades. He left, and as he was leaving, I said, you know, if he put in half this effort this semester, he would have passed. It bothers me that everyone is coming down to discuss this with me. I've been teaching 30 years. I kind of know what I am doing. I go off to take care of some paperwork, and return to my room 15 minutes later, and the principal is waiting outside my room. I enter my room and he comes in with me. I close the door, and he says, George is failing. His mother is in my office saying you won't speak to her. Why won't you let him pass? I say, well, I won't speak to her because they lied to a security guard to get to my room, and there really isn't anything to talk about. He failed the class. You can review his grades online. I'll be honest with you, I really resent you questioning me about this. I assign grades based on how they do on their work. I don't need to rationalize my grades to the dean, the AP, and to you. Either I know how to do my job, and you let me do it, or I don't know how to do my job and you put me on a corrective program so I can do it to your satisfaction. This backroom questioning of the grades I assign isn't right, and isn't how we are supposed to be doing our job. Now, do you think I know how to do my job? He said, yes, but... I interrupted him, then let me do it. I am willing to listen to input if you know how I can do it better than I am doing it now, but this really can't continue like this. We need to have a discussion at this school about what is appropriate for administrative interaction. This isn't the time or the place, but this can't continue. He apologized and left. I come to find out that the kid threatened to beat me down if he sees me again. He's 5 feet 11 inches 145 pounds. I am 6 feet 5 inches 250 pounds. I wish him luck with that. Have you ever accidentally met a celebrity who went above and beyond to help you? About 5 years ago, I had a wedding to go to in Chicago. I bought a gorgeous, long formal dress, and being that I am pretty short I needed to get the dress tailored. I called the local tailor in my town and was quoted $18 to fix my dress. When I arrived at the tailor, the man began measuring and drawing with chalk on my dress. At this time a handsome, impeccably dressed man came into the shop. I noticed that he seemed kind of boisterous with a look at me personality, but he was in no way rude or unkind. I just assumed he was a rich man that was used to people catering to him and being the center of attention. But he was not off-putting or anything. I did notice that the tailor totally stopped taking care of me so he could fawn and cater to the rich man instead of me, even though he was in the middle of marking my dress when the man came in. I did find the tailor extremely rude for this behavior, but I was so excited about my new dress I just put up with it and did not cause a scene. After several long minutes the tailor finally returned to me and began to tell me that my dress was going to cost $100 to hem, even though he had quoted me $18 over the phone and none of the stats for the dress had changed. He only needed to take it up a half an inch. I immediately knew he was trying to rip me off and I began to get quite upset. Then the handsome stranger, overhearing that I could not afford to pay $100 for my dress to be tailored, came to the rescue and offered to pay for the dress himself so my night would not be ruined. I thought it was so sweet and I introduced myself to him. The man put out his hand and introduced himself as Michael Irvin. I am not a sports fan, but of course I knew that name right away from Dallas Cowboys fame. I was very embarrassed that I did not know who he was on site, but he was so sweet and even wrote his autograph on the back of the receipt of my dress that he just shelled out $100 for. He then stood around and chatted with me and my ex-husband for about 20 minutes like we were old friends. I will say he seemed a little turned off that we did not know who he was right away, but he was just as sweet as could be. Now the kicker is that whenever I came to pick my dress up a couple of days later from the tailor, he again charged me $100 even though he clearly remembered the situation, and I had the receipt with Mr. Irvin's autograph on the back. Mr. Irvin even told my ex-husband and me that he had been using this tailor for many years, so of course the tailor knew him and would not have forgotten that Mr. Irvin paid for my dress. He refused to give me back my dress until I paid him the $100. I tried to get him to call Mr. Irvin to confirm that he did pay for this, but it would have been pointless because the man totally remembered the situation and already knew who Mr. Irvin was and that my dress was paid for by him. There was no way he forgot that this happened in his store in front of his face. Even though I should not have, I coughed up the other $100 just to get my dress back so I could catch my flight the next day. So in the end the tailor ended up making $200 off, making my dress a half of an inch shorter because he got paid twice, even though it should have only cost me $18. I have always hoped that one of these days I would run back into Mr. Irvin and be able to tell him what the tailor did to me, especially being that this was his regular tailor that he used all of the time. I would love for him to know the type of person that the tailor really is and that he rips off his customers. Anyway, going through the whole experience was totally worth it just to meet such a nice guy with a good heart trying to do good in the world. I'm still not a football fan, but I am a fan of Mr. Michael Irvin as a person now. If any of you ever run into him I hope you remember the story and relay it back to him and he can find a new tailor that's not such a shitty person. Have you ever been convinced with just try it once and regretted it? Women and, most, steroids do not mix. My boyfriend is a professional bodybuilder, and I've always enjoyed weight training in the gym, so I figured, hey, why not? I live in a South American country, so having curves is a part of the culture. Being that I have been a tall, very slim gal all my life, I wanted to see what it was like to have some womanly curves and experiment with the unknown. How bad could a little bit be? I started with one bottle of something called cystanin, which is a mix of different types of testosterone compounds. I injected twice a week for a month, and holy crap, after 1 week, I felt a huge difference. Not only in my training was I able to last longer, lift a bit heavier each day, but I started to feel different inside my own mind and body. I will say that despite the fact that I would come to regret my choice, I can at least take away something interesting from the experience, and that is to have a peek into what it feels like being a man. I was very attuned to the changes I was undergoing, and the horny feeling was really out of control. It was as if I had some sort of alarm going off inside my pants, like a beacon that was sending out signals and would not shut off, no matter where I was or what I was doing. I literally could not concentrate at work. I was totally distracted, and I think if I was a single man I might have impregnated a lot of women in that time. Also, I found that I was not as emotional. Things did not bother me as much and I felt very confident, especially in the gym. Testosterone really is like a turbo kick. No wonder men who are aging feel a part of themselves missing with less flowing in their bodies. I finished the first bottle in 1 month, and started a second bottle, this time DECA Durabolin. This one is known to make you gain weight quickly, but if you train it puts the weight in all the right spots. I most certainly gained a butt in this period, as I had absolutely nothing back there when I first started. I also became very strong, and I really loved the feeling. But, the side effects started to increase by the first week into the second bottle. My skin became noticeably thicker and more oily, and congested on the cheeks. I started to see some hair coming on my chin, and the upper part of my thighs had dark hair where I normally didn't. My back started to break out in acne, not so extreme at first, but it was there, and my body started to feel swollen. I had a hard time to even put my arms behind myself as it felt like I was going to burst. My ankles also were swollen so much that I had to take 2 days off of work and go to a doctor, as there was fluid buildup there. It went away on its own, and it was painful to walk long distances. Eventually I decided to stop the injections halfway through the second bottle, and then that's when my hell started. My skin had never been perfect, but I had it looking pretty nice up until this point. Suddenly, a few weeks after the last injections, my skin erupted all over my back, face, chest, and even on my arms and shoulders with cystic acne. Eventually, my jawline and cheeks would be covered in huge, painful red lesions, where it felt so tight and sore it hurt to even move my facial muscles. My cousin saw me on a trip to America and said my jawline also looked different, more masculine, and my voice had deepened a bit. I chalked it off to a cold, but I confided in my cousin only of my experiment. Obviously, he said stop now, even though I already had. I went through 6 months of just getting rid of the active cystic acne infection, dealing with inflamed skin, and yes, I did pop some of them. Yes, I know it's the worst thing I could do, and I swear that every single day I had at least 2 people come to me and ask me what the hell happened to my skin. Every day. So not only did I see a stranger in the mirror, a face ravaged and rife with irritation, but my self-confidence was at an all-time low. Never have I felt so terrible about myself, and never would I try that again. 2 years later, I still have scarring and my skin is not as smooth or even as it originally was. I feel I even lost fat in my face from the hormonal changes. Oh, and my period stopped for 4 months too, but I thankfully have a medication that has left me acne-free for the past year. It was stupidity combined with a lack of research on both the part of me and my boyfriend to have me try testosterone and highly androgenic steroids, and despite the fact that I got the body that I was looking for in a matter of 2 months, the price to pay was much higher than I expected. I regret it, but again, everything in life is a learning experience. It could have been worse, I guess. Are you still in touch with the first person you ever dated? No, as he's serving a federal prison sentence. We met in college, a Christian college I might add. We had a class together by accident. That Christmas he asked me out to holiday banquet. Very formal affair. We didn't see each other for long when we decided being friends was for the best. And we were. Except, his idea of friendship was an awkward, suffocating experience. He constantly called or dropped by when I was at work. He worked nights while I worked days. I swear I don't know when he slept. And because he was up all night at work he would call me in the dead of night. If I didn't answer he would continue calling until I either answered or silenced my phone. I had a group of people from college that was friends with. About 15 of us would get together on weekends. Well, Paul, not his name, would ask to be invited. I did, to be kind, but I wondered sometimes if a day could pass where I didn't have communication with him in some way. Time passed and we all graduated college and moved in our lives. But Paul moved about 10 miles away from where I ended up living. Great. He was still everywhere I was. He joined the same church as me and started showing up at my job all the time again. Finally I sat him down. I explained that I needed some space. I needed some time where he wasn't always where I was. I wanted to date and get married eventually, but I couldn't because he was around me so much that men assumed we were dating. He was crushed. If you get married your husband won't want me to talk to you. You can't do that. He complained. Yeah, that's the idea of marriage, where you choose one man to be faithful to. Yep, he probably won't want me seeing another man every single day. That is true. Little did I know I'd just set a ticking time bomb. I took a vacation with some friends, a married couple. We were gone for 2 weeks. I turned my phone off. My gosh, I'd forgotten what life was like to not have it constantly ringing. But when I returned I was greeted with his intense anger. Where had I been? What had I done? How late had I stayed out? Had I met any men? Had I gone on dates? He peppered me with questions as if he were a jealous lover and not merely a good guy friend. I stopped him. I explained that my private life wasn't any of his business. That if I went on dates or met someone I wasn't required to report to him. He lost it, screaming, yelling, throwing things. That's it. Enough. You have gone too far and I have had enough. We need to go our separate ways. I hate to say it because we've been friends for years, but you cannot act this way. It isn't appropriate and you've crossed my boundaries too many times. For 2 weeks I heard nothing from him. I was starting to relax when, ring, ring, ring. It was the weekend and I was up late watching a movie when my phone started ringing from an unknown number. Curiosity got the better of me and I answered. "I'm going to bill you. I'm going to cut you into tiny pieces and," I interrupted the strange whispered voice. "Who the heck are you and what do you think you're doing calling me in the middle of the night?" I used my stern teacher voice. Click. The phone went dead. I pulled out my .380 handgun and loaded it. I placed it in my nightstand and went to sleep. Monday morning when I arrived at work I was met by some coworkers that were concerned. "Annie, you need to hear this," I was told, and followed them to the school office. Someone dialed the voicemail on the phone and put it on speakerphone. Over and over, one after another were voice recordings in garbled or whispered voices threatening to bill me, calling me a whore and worse, growling into the phone. It had filled up the voicemail box. My heart sunk. I knew deep down who it was. My boss called me into his office. He had a background in security. Not security as in a mall cop or a security system for your home, but security, the kind involving the alphabet agencies of government and the military. "Who is targeting you? Do you know?" he asked. Oh yeah, I knew, and he knew him too. The police got involved and phone records were pulled, but the calls came from prepaid phones under no name. We knew who it was but had no proof. Meanwhile, every night he filled up the voicemails of my phone and my work phone. Then I was walking across the parking lot of Walmart when I felt someone's eyes on me. I looked up to see his truck flying across the parking lot and into the road. Oh my God, he's following me now? I couldn't prove it, but he began showing up in public places at the same time as me. What could I do? It was in public, so it wasn't like I could complain when he had a right to be there as much as anyone else. Until one Friday night, a group of friends and I went out to eat. It was a group of men and women, and while some of them were dating, I wasn't dating anyone. But one of the guys did sit across from me. Before we even had our food, Paul stormed into the restaurant and was in my face shouting about how dare I date that man and I was a whore, and the restaurant was silent except for Paul. I was beyond embarrassed. The man sitting across from me stood up and grabbed Paul by the arm, unceremoniously dragging him outside. 10 minutes later my friend returned while Paul didn't. I didn't ask, but I'm pretty sure Paul had the beatdown of the century because the other guy promised me Paul would be too afraid to hurt me now. For a few days I had peace, but then he was back at it again. And now I wasn't the only target. My friends started receiving the calls too. They shared voice recordings from their phones with me. "She's a B. She's a ST. She's a W." We all knew she was me. And then one day it stopped. Everything stopped and eventually I started breathing again. Until about 6 months later a man I worked with called me. "Annie, turn on the local 6 o'clock news. Now," he said. I switched my TV over and nearly dropped my phone. There was Paul's face splashed across the screen. Paul Michelson, 28, was arrested today. He is accused of violating a restraining order, being weird, and touching. Michelson confessed to all charges. I listened to the news anchor recount the gruesome story of how he'd taken a woman to a hotel room and brutally attacked and touched her. She survived and managed to escape the room, and another hotel guest helped her call 911. Paul admitted to police that he had intended to bill her. Police even stated they were shocked at how much he admitted. They didn't even have to interrogate him. He voluntarily poured out the whole story. It seems I had found peace because he had found another woman to harass. I've changed names to protect his family, who were kind people and always treated me well. It isn't their fault he became the man he is. It has been many years since he was sentenced to prison. I believe he comes up for parole in 2024. I hope he doesn't get it. I've mentioned here before that I've only ever dated older men. Paul was the one exception to that, though we stopped dating years before his arrest. What supplement do you take that would make everyone's life better? Not for everyone, but guys, let me put you on. This is how a supplement helped me get revenge on my cheating ex-girlfriend by hooking up with her best friend. I had always been a scrawny and unconfident guy, though I'm tall and have fluffy hair, so I found myself with a girlfriend, Sarah, my freshman year of high school. Sarah was the stereotypical mean girl and would try and have as much attention on her as possible. I was just her trophy boyfriend, as she would always order me around and not actually talk to me very much. Looking back, the relationship was doomed to fail. But how it ended really changed me. I was on the basketball team for my school with my friend Gabe. Gabe was a good-looking guy. We were about the same height, but he had more muscle than I did and was more confident than myself. I would often see him kind of flirting with Sarah in class and in the hallways, but when I would ask her about it she would just brush it off and tell me I was being insecure. I also never confronted Gabe about it because I was too scared of any confrontation. Then, the next few days that ensued, changed me. One night I was feeling lonely because Sarah had left me on read like she always did, so I decided to FaceTime her. When she picked up I instantly knew something was off. She wasn't in her house and there was a basketball poster on the wall behind her, which made me realize she was at another boy's house. I asked her where she was, but before she even answered I heard Gabe's voice in the background asking who she was on call with. She covered her mouth and instantly hung up. That was it. I was fed up and took my only initiative in the entire relationship, which was to break up. Worst part was, she didn't even try to explain the situation, which confirmed she was cheating in my mind. The next day at school, literally the next day, I got all the confirmation I needed. I was walking down the hallway, turned a corner, and saw Gabe and Sarah making out in the corner of some lockers. I ran to the nurses claiming I was sick and needed to leave, but in actuality I was just completely broken. I had my pride ripped out of me and felt like a hollow shell of a man. That night I was mindlessly scrolling through TikTok and came across this advert, Kingmaker, a testosterone boosting supplement. This is something I would normally ignore because of my pride, but I was at such a low point so I looked more into it. I knew I had low testosterone because I would consistently go to the gym and get no results, so this piqued my interest, and I decided to go on Amazon and buy it. The day it came I took it and I instantly felt different. My energy levels and overall confidence were through the roof. In a day I had turned from a pathetic sad loser to feeling like I could take on the world. I began hitting the gym again and started talking to multiple girls on Snap. A bunch of girls were interested in me, but I had my sights set on one in particular. Emily. Emily is a bad as F blonde and Sarah's best friend. I was determined to get with this girl and make sure Sarah knew about it so I could have my revenge. After about 3 weeks of talking on Snap and a couple dates, I invited her over to my house. And she said yes. When she arrived we got right into it. My SX drive was through the roof, so we went multiple rounds. When I was hitting from the back I took a video and sent it to Sarah, with the caption, "Better than you ever were." She opened it right away then blocked me. Apparently after the fact her and Emily got into a huge fight and aren't friends anymore. But that doesn't matter to me because I got my revenge, am now bigger and stronger than Gabe, and still get with Emily whenever I want. What is the pettiest notice you've received from your homeowners association? When I bought my home in southern Arizona, it was never disclosed that it was in an HOA neighborhood. I discovered this when I received a certified package with a poorly Xeroxed copy of 3 inches of loose paper expounding on the rules and rights of the HOA. And a bill for the past year that the home had been in foreclosure. I paid from the date of the notice only. Over the years though, HOA notices have included 1. Visible weeds. I have a rock and cactus landscaped front yard. The only time weeds are there is right after monsoons, when each and every house gets the same notice, whether you actually have weeds or not. 2. Tree branches overhang the sidewalk too low. I have a large mesquite tree. I had to stand on a ladder to reach the offending branches to trim. 3. A noxious weed in my yard. Thankfully, sarcasm, they included a photo, because for the 4 previous years, said noxious weed had been a regularly pruned bush, part of the landscaping. 4. A car parked on the street when there was open space in my driveway. Again, southern Arizona, so super hot, and again, I have a tree, so shade. The neighbor's maid would park her car under my tree in the street. 5. Visible trash receptacle on a specific day. Thanks HOA for noticing that I had my trash can out on the street on my trash pickup day. 6. Visible trash receptacles. The neighbor closest to my driveway kept his trash cans beside his house in the open. One had blown over into my property. 7. Unapproved mailbox. The mailbox was there when I arrived. It does not look like the others in the cul-de-sac because those houses were built later by a different contractor. 8. Tree branches overhanging my driveway. 9. Landscaping rocks in the road. 2 reasons. When monsoon rains fall, we get tremendous flooding for a while, then it all soaks into the desert. Rainwater can displace rocks. And reason, neighborhood kids played in my yard under my tree. Again, southern Arizona equals hot. 10. Debris in yard. Again, monsoon season when the rain and wind stripped mesquite leaves, cleaned and disposed of even before arrival of the HOA letter. And what do I get in return for my HOA fees? Absolutely nothing. 0 amenities. No pool. No common areas. No parks. No playgrounds. No gated community. All we get is the privilege of busybodies driving around writing notices. I respond to some notices with photos, some with sarcasm. Have you ever lost any respect for someone instantly? When my oldest son was about 16, he had a very good friend who I will call Joe, who was half Mexican and half white. He came from a broken home, divorced parents. His mother was a drug addict and had, I believe, 5 other children with several different men. His father had basically just checked out of his parenting role. This boy was at my house constantly. I gave him rides from his house to our house. I took him to his driver's classes. He ate many meals with us, and stayed the night at our house frequently. He had no structure, no guidance, no one to teach him about life. Guess you could say I basically assumed that role. He was a great kid and I would have done anything to help him. At one point, he had been living in a townhouse with his mother and just one of his sisters. I would pick him up from this townhouse and I would bring him to our house so he could hang out with my son and us. At some point I realized something was wrong with his living situation. The more I observed this townhouse when I was there to pick him up, something just felt off. He finally broke down and told me that his mother had abandoned him and his sister. He was embarrassed and he didn't want anyone to know. The sister had gone to the grandparents' house to live and Joe stayed at the townhouse, even after utilities had been cut off. I assumed the landlord had taken back possession of the townhouse, and Joe had nowhere to stay. I believe the landlord had disposed of the contents of the townhouse, including all of Joe's clothing. When I found out this had happened, I went out and bought him some clothes. The basics. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. I let him stay at our house for several weeks, and tried to help him figure out what he was going to do. He had discussed the military with me on numerous occasions and always had the utmost respect for my, now ex-husband. Although the war in Iraq was in full swing, we told him that there are many career fields that wouldn't put him in harm's way. We just had to make sure that he made a good choice using his career field. Since he was a smart kid, I knew he would score well on his ASVAB tests, and we would help him to make a decision which career field to enter. My husband was retired from the Navy as an officer and he was very supportive of our young men joining the service, but agreed with my opinion that you need to make good choices in your career rather than just taking the biggest sign-on bonus. The day I lost all respect for my husband was the day that he realized I had gone out and bought Joe clothing. I don't know what my husband's problem was, but he hit the roof. A little background on my husband. He's a Cuban descent and came to the States as an immigrant at the age of 5, his parents settling in the Bronx. He was very well educated, a retired naval officer, and started his civilian career, making very good money, 6 figures plus. This was not a financial burden on us. He always called me a flocking bleeding heart liberal, which was supposed to be an insult, although I thought of it as a compliment. So, here he is having his tantrum over me spending a couple of $100s on clothes for a kid with nothing. My husband had the balls to make the following comments about Joe in front of my 14-year-old son. He obviously disagreed with me purchasing anything for this poor kid, and then these words came out of his sick mouth. "I can't believe you've gone out and done this. We don't even know this kid's lineage." Well, in a nutshell, my husband is extremely prejudiced of other Hispanic cultures, and since we didn't know this kid's lineage, we should not help him? That was the day that I realized what a disgusting human being my husband was. And don't think that this went unnoticed by my 14-year-old who is listening to these comments he made. I can't say that my son lost respect for him as I did, but he's repeated my husband's comments many times since that day. He should be ashamed of himself. I am grateful that I can call him my text husband. And if you want to know what ended up happening to Joe? He knew nothing of the comments my husband made. Joe decided to enlist in the army after all, and he asked my husband to please be the man to enlist him. What a privilege and honor he gave my undeserving husband. If only knew what a piece of shit he is. My husband did enlist Joe into the army, and he's doing very well. He's made it his career. Joe got married and has had 3 children. I am so proud of Joe, and it's been an honor knowing him since he was a kid. Accidentally burned down my neighbor's fence and she tries to milk me for $10,000. Judge humbles that ass up real quick. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows, have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also, I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard, where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months and it is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and made 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use. It was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence, along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave. He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him. I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson/fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document. No logo or company name. She then adds, I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water. Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, zazas everywhere, never mowed it. Now looking at this paper she wants a mahogany fence, and a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges? I said I need to get an estimate myself. This doesn't feel right. She says remember you agreed to replace my fence, and a real man keeps promises. I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened. He flipped the flock out and told me, son, don't you give that slut a single dime. He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day I had the guy come out for an estimate, and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence. Technically it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences. She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care, from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates I give copies to the woman and she is having none of it. I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house. They're probably really shitty contractors. I said no, I know them personally, they are really nice people and do great work. She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 a.m. And this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her. I explained, I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep. She goes, what kind of lazy asshat sleeps in until 2 p.m.? At this point I had about lost it, and told her you can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my ass and get nothing. She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work, writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning I wake up, and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad, and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying I'm sorry the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project, and you will be paying me full price. Oh really? After that I did not say a single word to her, and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out she had plans to remodel these things for a long time, and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court I lay everything out. The quotes, being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law BTW, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your daggum mind. Not only did this young man tell the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees, $800. So I burned this woman's fence down and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool. She took a huge financial loss from this. Not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. What is the most shocking thing someone has done in your house that they thought was normal? A boss told me, similar to Ruth Harvey's story, that they had visitors who let their young daughter roam naked and let go wherever she happened to be when the urge hit. This was a couple who were friends of his wife and she'd been friends ever since undergrad days. My boss and his wife had visited their home a few times before they had a daughter and vice versa. In his opinion, they defined the wild-eyed far-left Californian and he never enjoyed the visits. High's own wife was more conservative than her friends, but it would often be 3-on-1 no matter what the topic was. He knew nothing about sport because contact sports are barbaric. They both favored full-on socialism and so on. But then they had the child, so there hadn't been any visits in a few years. Until one day when my boss's wife said they'd be in the area. Wouldn't it be great to get together? She also hinted that maybe he could overlook their very liberal views and crank up the grill if things weren't going too badly. They arrive and the daughter, about 3.5, is naked within minutes. My boss starts to say something when the other wife, the mom, says that they're raising their daughter to love her body and all three are often fully nude around their own house. My boss says something to the effect of, do you think it's a good idea, when the other guy jumps all over him. That's why women are so put down. All most men think about is sex. How could you even think of sexualizing a 3-year-old? It's exactly that attitude we're trying to break here. She has no problem with her body, so it must be you. Clearly, he would not be cranking up the grill. Unfortunately, his own wife had never asked them to stay for dinner. He guessed he could survive another hour or so when the girl let go all over the hardwood floor in the dining room. She peed, she pooped and then she peed more, and then just walked away. Meanwhile, her parents, who saw the whole thing, continued on with their conversation. When it became clear that they weren't going to budge, he got up to clean up the mess. That's when both parents yelled out, Donn, not his real name, sit down right now. We are not going to have our daughter taught that natural bodily functions are dirty or bad. Now he'd had enough, so seeing that, his wife pulled him aside. He made clear that they were leaving right now, that they were going to pay to have the floor refinished. He never wanted to see or hear about them again and he had half a mind at least to call Child Protective. Evidently, the other couple sensed what was coming and so loudly said to the daughter, we'd better leave now. These are not very nice people and we are better off without people like that around us. They did eventually send a check to have the floor fixed and he never called CPS. Fairly aggressive girlfriend stole from my bank account, so I sent her academic career into a nosedive. I'm a senior at a large state university. This happened in the first semester of my freshman year. I was selected for an honors-type program that placed me in a co-ed dorm building with every other student in the program. As a dumb freshman, I rushed into a relationship with a freshman girl who lived right above me. We'll call her Megan. It was convenient for me to date someone who lived so close, but everyone else in our building hated Megan because she talked a lot, and almost exclusively about herself. She bragged often about being a fairly aggressive person, but somehow I overlooked that mile-wide red flag. Right after Thanksgiving break, at the end of an evening class, I got a call from my mom, who noticed some unusual activity on my checking account. Back then I had no credit card, so this account/debit card was my only access to my savings while I lived on campus. I rarely needed to buy anything during the semester, so I was puzzled to find that $104.29 had left my bank account over 2 weeks, in the form of 6 Grubhub food orders. At this point, I trusted Megan, but I decided to ask her about the money right away. She denied any involvement and suggested that I cancel my debit card. After a really long phone call to the bank, I did just that. Next, I reached out to Grubhub customer service on Twitter. Hey, My card was stolen and used for food orders on these dates. Can I have the receipts? They sent me the first and last receipts, but they had to redact the personal info of the account holder. I say redact in quotes because they just used the Snapchat draw tool, and Megan's name was still clearly visible on both receipts. What's more, the most recent receipt was only 2 hours old. She was probably still eating when I chopped up my debit card. It's worth noting that she and I both had unlimited dining plans, paid for by our respective parents, and we lived 500 feet from the nearest dining hall. She didn't need to order food, and she definitely didn't need my money to do it. So I texted her again. I have the receipts from Grubhub. Are you sure you didn't make those orders? Her reply, fuck you for suspecting me. Fairly aggressive, wouldn't you say? I hatched a plan to collect security camera footage of her picking up the order from that evening. However, by midnight, Megan arrived at my door in tears and confessed to everything, plus she admitted to being a serial shoplifter. Exhausted, I sent her away and decided to deal with everything in the morning. By the next day, everyone in our building seemed to know what was going down, probably because Megan had already begun broadcasting her version of the story. I sent Megan a breakup text and decided that the $104.29 was a loss. At least I escaped unscathed, right? Well, less than 2 days later, she entered my room when I wasn't looking. I was sitting at my desk when I noticed her standing silently behind me. Megan, give me my stuff. Where's my stuff? Me, what stuff? Megan, you know, I did not know. She tore through the room, looking for something that she refused to identify. Just as quick as she came, she was gone, and I locked the door because obviously this wasn't over yet. Within a minute, she was back. She stood outside my door, knocking and demanding I let her back inside. The knocking quickly got more violent. She started shouting, I know you're fuck ing in there. And opened the mother f-ing door. Mind that we lived in this building with students in our program who all know each other, and all of them could hear her. Pretty quickly, Megan was rattling the handle of my door. Next, she began throwing herself at it, shoulder first, trying to break it down. I lived next door to my RA, but judging by the lack of any intervention, he was elsewhere. So I whipped out my phone and texted him to send backup. Meanwhile, I saw my heavy wooden door bending and buckling. I even heard it crack a bit. My RA was on duty in another building, so he sent 3 of his colleagues to de-escalate the situation. They brought Megan downstairs, where she revealed that the stuff she wanted was just the t-shirt and keychain that she gave me for my birthday. Whatever, I let her have those. I still just wanted this to be over. However, once I shared my story with the resident life staff, they filed university paperwork to place a no-contact order between me and Megan. They also recommended I contact the campus police, who then told me I should get my stolen money back in small claims court. I couldn't even get there without a car or money to pay for an Uber. Sorry, Judge Judy. At the request of the campus police, I also contacted the Title IX office at my school, sending them the story of everything you've read so far. They were interested, to say the least, although I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted a clean breakup and a fresh start. But a Title IX representative informed me that they were bringing 3 misconduct charges against Megan: theft, threatening/violent behavior, and inciting an intervention by university staff. The representative asked me to serve as a witness in Megan's disciplinary hearing the next semester. I tentatively agreed, right before the representative set the hearing date for February 14th, Valentine's Day. I thought it was a joke, but they really did that. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, the no-contact order was still in effect, but a few of my friends had kept tabs on Megan. For starters, she failed all of her classes in the fall. Someone in my math course confessed that Megan had tried to sleep with him while she was dating me, and he had to repeatedly tell her no. Even worse, Megan kept telling a twisted version of the whole story to try and turn my friends against me. So when I found out that she had found a new boyfriend, it felt good to know that the V-Day disciplinary hearing ruined whatever evening plans they might have made. I arrived alone at the disciplinary board office, unsure what to expect. The board consisted of grad students, and the hearing was expected to run into the night. Unlike me, Megan did not come alone. She brought both of her parents as character witnesses. That wasn't even a thing here. This wasn't a real courtroom, as you'll soon see. And that's not all. Megan's parents also paid a lawyer to defend her against the charges. The board knew that was unnecessary, but Megan's parents believed so strongly in their daughter's innocence that they had already paid this 3-piece suit make her case. In the name of fairness, the board members offered me pro bono legal representation, a junior economics major, who we'll call Jimmy. Jimmy had already read my account of the events from the fall, and thanks to my screenshots of Grubhub receipts, he said there was an okay shot of the charges sticking. Then I told him something I'd kept secret for months. When Megan tried to break down my door and I whipped out my phone to text my RA, I also filmed the whole thing. Jimmy couldn't get enough of the video. There was Megan, kicking and screaming and clearly trying to break into my dorm room. It was all the evidence I needed, and no one saw it coming. In the hearing, when the time came for me to make the case against Megan, Jimmy played the video on a big screen in front of everyone. The room went insane. In that instant, I realized that Megan really had convinced everyone I was the liar. In her version of the story, I gave her permission to buy food using my account. She told her parents that she'd asked me politely for her belongings, which I'd rudely hidden from her in my dorm room. In Megan's story, I was the sociopath trying to ruin her reputation. Before I unveiled the video, it was her word against mine. I still didn't want revenge, even after finding out that Megan tried to cheat on me. But when I saw her parents flipping out at the video, "Why didn't you tell us you did this?" And her lawyer raising hell. This evidence was not provided in pretrial disclosure. And a board member standing over him. Sir, this is not a court of law. Please return to your seat, and him shouting objection. And her replying, we don't have objections, this isn't a court of law, and Jimmy, my new best friend, just trying not to laugh out loud. That's when I realized how good revenge can feel when it's fair and deserved. The board found Megan responsible on all 3 charges. My side of the bench recommended the university terminate her housing contact and force her to pay restitution. Her side recommended only restitution and a reprimand. The board compromised. Her family paid back most of the money she stole, most because 2 of the 6 orders had the same price, and the lawyer convinced the board I had duplicated an order, and Megan was forced to move into a different dorm building. This probably would have helped her anyway, because every student in our program's building knew everything she'd done and lied about. They wouldn't speak to her, and no one wanted to be her roommate. By the time she had to move buildings, she'd already failed all of her courses again. Having paid for her tuition, her unused dining plan, her lawyer, and her restitution, Megan's parents finally pulled her out of school. Where are they now? Last I heard, Megan returned as a part-time student, but I never saw her again because the no-contact order still stands. I'm now Facebook friends with the guy Megan tried to seduce. Oh, and Jimmy and I connected on LinkedIn. As for me, well, I no longer date fairly aggressive people. What was something small you went to the doctor for that turned out to be very significant? When I was a little boy of about 10 years old, I told my mother that I thought I needed a new prescription for my glasses. I told her I was having difficulty seeing the blackboard in class at school. This was 1963 and I was living with my family in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So my mother, thinking it was going to be a routine checkup, took me to the local ophthalmologist who always checked my vision. At that point I thought that I was simply going to walk out with a new prescription and life would go on. My ophthalmologist was a wonderful old gentleman who was a very careful and very thoughtful doctor. He was the kind of person with whom you could really trust and feel comfortable. Even now I can vividly picture him in the examination room, as that intensely bright light, that has occurred hundreds of times throughout my life, came close to my dilated eyes. After examining my eyes he turned to me, my mother was in the waiting room, and said that I was going blind in my left eye. He told me I had a detached retina and that I needed surgery immediately. Ironically, what he told me next was actually more impactful than being told that I was going blind in my left eye. He told me that I would never ever be able to play football again. When I heard that, I bolted out of the exam room, ran through the waiting room out the front door and sat down on the sidewalk outside his office weeping. My mother, shocked at my actions, thought, what in the world is going on? After collecting me from outside, she immediately went to the doctor and he told her that I needed to go to the medical college in Charleston, South Carolina and have emergency surgery. That day we got in the car and drove over 100 miles to Charleston to the medical college and arrived at the department where the top eye surgeons examined me. They told my parents that I was not going blind in just one eye, I was going blind in both eyes. They then informed us that they were not capable of doing the surgery because of the extent of the retinal damage. They recommended that we travel to Johns Hopkins in Maryland, the only place at that time capable of performing the kind of surgery I needed. Suffice it to say, the head of ophthalmology at Johns Hopkins took my case and did the surgery. I found out later that the members of the Presbyterian church that my family attended also prayed all that day for a successful surgery. 10 hours later the surgery was over and was a huge success. Ever since I have thanked God not only for my original doctor who detected my problem but also for all of the amazing medical professionals who were instrumental in my treatment. One final caveat. The wonderful doctor who first discovered my condition knew that I had to have surgery on both eyes. Apparently, as I found out later, he didn't have the heart to tell me that my condition was so dire. What disturbing rumor turned out to be true at your school? When I was a senior in high school, we had a new teacher join the faculty to teach health and home economics. She was probably about 26 years old and very, very attractive. Everyone was talking about the hot new teacher. As I was senior class president, I needed a new faculty advisor since my previous advisor of 3 years retired at the end of my junior year. About 2 weeks later, the principal called me into his office and informed me that the new hot teacher was going to be our new class advisor for the rest of the year. As a result, she and I spent a lot of time together, at school and off campus, organizing and running myriad events to raise money for the class, plan the prom, field trips, etc. Soon, the rumors started flying around that she and I were messing around. This was completely false. I can say she never acted inappropriately towards me or suggested anything to make me think she had plans for any type of physical or sexual activity. She was a fantastic advisor and always just that, a class advisor. I spent the rest of the year denying these rumors with friends, with teachers and with parents. I was even interrogated by my wrestling coach the day before the district championship match. She and I had a laugh about it at graduation as she had to face similar questions from other faculty as well as the principal. She confided in me that she had tendered her resignation, but the principal would not accept it and said he believed her and would ensure the rumor was squashed. So I graduated and left for my plebe year at West Point, forgetting about the entire situation. At West Point, the first year is called plebe year rather than freshman year. The first semester of my plebe year was moving along as it should, with no unusual events worth mentioning until the final month. Then, in early December, the topic of my high school faculty advisor resurfaced. One night when I was studying, there was a knock on my door and the company tactical officer, a regular Army captain, walked in and told me to report to his office immediately as there was a phone call for me from the Dover Police Department. Now, I immediately assumed it was my brother playing some kind of twisted joke on me since he was a captain in the very same police department waiting for me on the phone. Since my TAC was standing right behind me, I answered the phone as we were taught. Cadet Kerwick speaking. How may I help you, sir/ma'am? I immediately recognized the voice on the other end. It was not my brother but a close friend I had grown up with and known for over 15 years. He said, "Hey Steve, hope things are going well there, but I don't have time to chit-chat. I need to record this call and ask you some questions. Do you consent to being recorded and will you allow me to swear you in so that this is official, and if anything you say is later proven to be false or misleading, you may be subject to criminal charges and a warrant issued for your arrest." His name was Bill but we all called him Woody. I said, "Woody, is this some kind of a joke? Who put you up to this, because I'm about to shit my pants as I have no idea what this is about." My mind was racing so fast trying to guess, counter-guess, and trying to process that I could potentially be kicked out of West Point for something I had no clue about as of that moment. Woody replied, "It's no joke and this is a very serious case we are investigating concerning inappropriate behavior between an adult and a minor or minors with regard to possible consensual or non-consensual sexual activities or sexual assault." That's when I knew exactly what this was about. I said, "Go ahead Woody, I consent and will answer any questions you have." So I basically had to repeat his words almost like being sworn in as a witness who was going to testify in court. The questions all focused on that hot, young class advisor I worked with during my senior year. They kept me on the phone for an hour asking every possible question imaginable and then asking those same questions again in a different way. I answered every one honestly and candidly, but at the 1 hour mark I was becoming agitated as it seemed like they were on a witch hunt and were going to keep asking questions until they got an answer they liked. So I spoke up and said, "Gentlemen, you can continue to ask me these questions in any order or format that you desire, but I can assure you that my answers will not change because they are truthful and there was never one moment where Ms. X acted inappropriately in front of me. She was always completely professional and never even insinuated at something that would cross the line between teacher and student." Following that statement they had no further questions and told me they would contact me again if they needed to follow up or get additional details. My TAC could see I was visibly shaken, so we talked for another hour and I told him everything about the situation. He never had to ask me if I was being truthful because every cadet adheres to a strict honor code that becomes part of who we are. That code states that a cadet shall not lie, cheat or steal, nor tolerate those who do. He told me that I handled things professionally and can hold my head high if I ever return home for a visit. And that was that. I went back to my studies and prepared for my final exams and went home for a short Christmas break. That's when I found out that my teacher, my class advisor, had been found guilty of having a relationship with someone in the current senior class. That relationship was sexual and he was a minor. Seems the student ran around bragging to everyone that he was doing it with the hot teacher. I don't know if it was true or if he made it up. What was true was that she was fired from her job and never allowed to teach again. She had to register as a SX offender for the rest of her life. She lost everything: family, friends, money, possessions, and had to serve time as an inmate in a state correctional facility. If you ask me what I think, I don't believe it. I know the kid who was allegedly in a relationship with her. He was a complete jerk, loud mouth, not smart, not smooth, not good looking, and most of all, he was a liar and a storyteller who would say anything if he thought it would make him look cool. I had wished I could have tracked him down and interrogated him my way. My guess is things might have ended differently, but I never got the chance to run into him and the cards he laid were played. What's the hardest thing you've ever done in life? Reported trauma, even though I knew it would end my marriage and change my life completely. I met him when I was 16. He was the first boy I'd ever fallen in love with. He was the first boy I called my boyfriend, and he was the boy who had every other first you could imagine. I gave him everything I had. But it still wasn't enough. I found out the night I turned 23 that my husband of 5 years had gotten weird with my 13-year-old sister. I didn't know what to do, what to say, or how to react initially. If I'm being honest, part of me wanted to run away. Part of me wanted to go drown myself or take a bottle of pills. I could not wrap my head around what I had just learned. I remember looking into my sister's eyes and seeing how afraid she was. She kept saying through sobs over and over, "I'm so sorry I ruined your marriage. I'm so sorry I ruined your life." But it wasn't her fault. I called my parents. They were on vacation at the time. About an hour after my sister told me. I regret not calling them the second she told me. I should have been stronger. The next day, we found out my husband had also gotten weird with my 9-year-old sister. My parents told me they wanted to call the police. My dad seen I hadn't slept all night, so he told me to go home and that we would call them together. When I came back, I can't tell you how close to sewer slide I was in those few hours. I drove home and kept wanting to press on the gas as hard as I could and slam into the side of the freeway. I wanted to die. Who was this horrible person I'd just been married to for the last few years? How did I not see this happening? Later that day, 24 hours after my sister told me, I called the police to report what he had done to my baby sisters. They came and interviewed us all separately. We had to go to the police station so my sisters could give their accounts of what happened again. They were brave and they were strong. I cooperated with the police. They said without my husband's confession, he would never be prosecuted for doing what he did. Despite physical evidence showing both my sisters were telling the truth, there was no DNA link to prove it was him who had done this to them. It's been almost 2 years, and nothing has happened. I separated from my husband that very day I found out. I knew my sisters were telling the truth about what he'd done to them. Not once did he deny their allegations. All he could say was, "Please don't call the police. Things have been hard on my own. Money is tight. We are still technically married, which I am ashamed of. I'm saving up for a divorce. My goal is to get it done this year. He has gone on to live life happy like nothing happened. He met a girl online a month later and they've been together ever since. My sisters struggle still, and I see how those events change them. They go to counseling weekly, and my parents tell me it's helping them. I'm very often depressed and regret so much in my life. But if I had to go back to that day and make that choice again to call and report what he had done, I'd do it all again. To the person who is struggling to make that decision, tell the truth. It will be hard, but it's the right thing to do. My boyfriend doesn't know that I know that he secretly helped me. I couldn't hold tears for days over such selfless friendship. Almost a decade ago when I joined university I was dirt poor. My fee was waived off, but still I couldn't afford day-to-day expenses. I would hardly get one meal per day. During second semester I and John, not real name, were in a group project together where our friendship developed. I never told him about my circumstances, but looks betray all. He would randomly ask me why I was getting leaner, if I had some worries. He would take me more and more to have dinners outside. I thought maybe he is a food lover and in the meantime wants to have company of a friend. One day, he asked me to help him with some freelancing project as he had a couple of other projects going and couldn't manage a third one. He said that I can keep the earnings of the said project. I refused the earnings part but insisted. Anyways, I got a good amount of money by doing that project. He continued to give me the projects that he didn't have time to do. After about 4 to 5 months he told me that he can hook me up with a client. The next day I got an email from the said client. After some mandatory intro and samples he gave me a project after 2 days. Semesters passed by, the projects kept on coming and coming from the same client. Projects were easy, didn't take much time to affect my studies in any way. My living condition improved, I would say drastically, as I could afford 2 to 3 meals a day, didn't have to wear torn shoes, could wear decent clothes. Got my degree, landed my first job after 6 months, invited my best friend to dinner at a restaurant. He hugs me, says he is so happy and proud of me. We gossiped, ate, enjoyed our time to the fullest. He goes to the bathroom. Suddenly, I remember that I should share this news with my client. I email him. Phone vibrates. It's my friend's phone. I glance over at the phone lying on the table. It's an email notification. The sender is my name. My friend was my client. He helped me during the toughest phase of my life. When I thought I couldn't make it, he helped me. He helped me so selflessly that he has never mentioned even once that he was the client although it's been a decade. There never was any project. He just wanted to help me without me feeling lesser. That's why the projects were so easy. That's why the client never asked for any revision. He still doesn't know that I know this secret. But I know John. I know the selfless angel that you are. You are not just my friend but more than a brother to me. Thanks for being there for me always. What was the reaction of HR when you resigned? I was with the firm for about 5 years 3 months. One fine day, I got an offer letter from a leading MNC in trending technology. I resigned the same day and sent the mail to my manager and ceased HR in the evening. He called me around 10 a.m. next day and inquired about good time to have discussion. I went at 12 and we had a very short discussion and the conversation went like this. I share a cordial relationship with most of my management. HR, we respect your decision of resign and we wish you all the best. Can you please tell me your team details and your manager? Me, thanks and told the details HR. So, 30 will be your last day with us. May I know the reason for resignation? Me, I don't like the management here. Is the feedback I am gonna share with you just for record's sake? Or you are actually gonna share this with management? HR, what made you think feedback was not shared with the management? Me, I have many scenarios where feedback was taken but never acted upon. HR, I will make sure. Please share. Me, fine. Anyways I have made my decision but I don't want to leave unspoken about the fact. I have never thought of resigning from this organization. But, many fake promises are made. HR, who made false promise? Me, you know who usually does. HR, smiles. Me, I have been promised an on-site without being asked and I know there was a budget problem in project but management is frequently flying which made me rethink my place here. HR, okay got the reason. Anyways he explained about all the policies and rules to be followed during notice period and we are done for that day. I went to my usual routine. Within next few hours, my resource manager not my immediate supervisor, walks up to me and asks if I would take back my resignation if offered an on-site. Next day, I get a call location HR and he asked me if I would be offered on-site I would stay back I said I might think. Next day RM comes to me, a new on-site opportunity has popped up in some other project and they're looking for people. I gave them your name to them, talk to them and let me know. I said I need some time and I have few questions. Is it long-term? What is the expectation? Is it different from my existing stack? How long would it be? For all he said you can manage. It will be minimum of 1 year. I said okay and we'll let you know of couple of days. He asked me to do it faster. I called the other manager on Friday and asked him the same above questions for which he said it is an immediate requirement from client. And I need to learn new technology. If I am okay with it I need to take back my resignation so that they could do initiate visa. I asked him what is stopping you from initiating visa if I am serving notice period? He said it is policy I said okay. I told him I will take my resignation but on one condition. In case the visa is rejected / client doesn't like profile. I want a written statement that my last date would be the same day as earlier. For which, he is not sure he need to talk to HR on that. I am confused and lost in thought. I said I will get back to him on Monday. On the same day, I went to a shop nearby bought couple of beer and started thinking of the opportunity. For an instance, I thought I better take my resignation back and travel abroad. It has been one of my dreams to stay abroad for at least a year straight. I gave it a thought over weekend and slept over it. I called my brother whom I go to for advice. He said only one thing: if you have ever taken steps, stick to that no matter what. That is what makes you better person. And at the same time I heard quote in movie which said when you say no to bigger things in life you grow stronger. Then I decided I will continue with my resignation. I met my RM on Monday, told him that I don't want to take risk. I am not getting confidence in this opportunity. He said okay. I told the same to the other manager. He said no problem. After this I got 3 more calls from HR reg change of project, change of technology, on-site again, and had around 7 to 8 meetings with manager. On my last day, which is mid-March, whole country came to a standstill cause of corona and all the on-site travels are suspended. I am happy that I made a correct decision. Had I stayed with on-site promise, my future could have come to a standstill. Always stick with your decision, and move forward sincerely. It is destined to happen whichever is to happen. Cheers.